Sayori's poetry.
If I share a secret with you, will you promise not to tell? I think Sayori is the best poet in the literature club. I'm just not good at being creative, period. Even with poetry, and MC is still learning. Yuri has a lot of literary talent, but she needs to focus more on content over form. And Natsuki has the opposite problem. She has great poetry ideas, but would really benefit from having more tools in her writing toolkit. Sayori, though, phew. When she's at her best, none of us can approach her. Which is terrible sometimes because her poetry is devastating. So she uses all that talent to just rip your heart out and stomp on it. Although to her, I guess it just seems like she's authentically replicating her viewpoint. I guess that's part of why it's so devastating to us. Do you have a particularly favorite Sayori poem from Best Sister?
You can probably guess, but...
Aw, really? Sayori not your favorite poet?
I can't remember a single poem that was written this. I'm sorry, they're not relevant.
I guess your poetry can be pretty damaging. I guess I forget sometimes how awful stuff in here can seem to you even though it's fake. And I guess Sayori's poetry can probably be pretty upsetting sometimes. But it really is very good, ignoring the subject matter. Hopefully you can look at it for its high quality without getting too upset by the actual contents.
The poetry's... No, we still have to talk about our mod. Okay, Monica, what do you have to say about this one?
I had a hard time watching that mod. There's a reason we didn't show it during the semester. It was pretty awful to handle. Did you play it yet over in the mod collection?
I sure did.
Watching Sayori and MC die was terrible. And you get a little bit of the old me. God, I was so awful. It's terrible, but one of the only happy things that happened in that mod is that I sort of get my comeuppance. Because in losing MC, I also lose the player, presumably. And the protagonists, MC and Sayori, don't even know they're giving me my karma. It's just me accidentally ruining things for myself, as usual. But that aside, that mod was just a constant dose of horribleness all the way through. I think Sayori was a little embarrassed to show it after we made really fun, lighthearted ones. What did you think of it?
Oh, it was horrifying. It was dark, but I appreciated it. What? Like, I haven't been traumatized by a visual novel before. My option isn't here because I'm just cold and dead inside, so I'll pick this one.
It might be that the mod is really good, but if it is, I don't think I'd know. The characters are just too close to me, and I have too much emotional investment in them. It's impossible for me to give a fair critique, because the mod just makes me feel awful inside. And I don't know if that means it's bad or good or what.
For me, I can only give it credit for being better than Rain Clouds. Like, I'm probably never going to end up playing Rain Clouds for the channel, but like, I always felt that Rain Clouds was too heavy-handed with how they portrayed Sayori's depression. Like, they took the traits that she described in her confession to MC and made it as if that was all she ever was. And, like, I feel like that's too extreme a view of Sayori. And, my god, the vanilla parts of Rain Clouds are insufferable, especially early on. Like, the mod, it has a lot of problems, and I feel like this take on it was more believable and realistic. That's how I feel.
But it definitely succeeds in making me feel something, I guess. What do you want to talk about?
Let's move on to Yuri. Being over-analytical.
Yeah, she does that sometimes. I can empathize, I'm pretty analytical myself. The difference is, mine tends to be internal. But Yuri has a bad habit of doing her thinking out loud sometimes. And she might be a bit more prone to analysis paralysis. I feel like usually I'm pretty good at being decisive. I think about it, decide on something, and then do it. But sometimes Yuri just keeps thinking about it. Of course, her tendency to think carefully about things can also be a strength. It's just one that's carried to excess occasionally. Wouldn't you agree?
Thinking out loud freaks out others. I'd say it's mostly a strength.
I agree. It's good to consider things carefully. And to be honest, I really appreciate that Yuri is so thoughtful. Sayori and Natsuki can sometimes act precipitously, and MC has the tendency to think with his heart rather than his brain. So it's a big help to have someone a little more reflective in the club. Helps hold things together.
More about Yuri in episode 4, Illness.
Oh yeah, I remember that. And Sayori had us all go over there and tend to her. That was a nice day, although I'm sorry that Yuri had to be sick for it to happen. Still, that was wonderful for us to meet somewhere different. Maybe we ought to do that more often. One thing that does still puzzle me is how illness works in here. As I think I might have explained it to Natsuki, our simulation clearly models contagious disease. But I don't know if, for instance, Natsuki's at increased lung cancer risk because of smoking, or if I could conceivably cure it by coding if she did. When I look at that kind of stuff in the curve miles, I get a headache. Hopefully I never have to find out. As long as our illnesses aren't too severe, I'd prefer not to have to dig around and code to fix diseases. And at least it was a nice excuse for us to have a big club party of sorts. What did you think of all that?
She really didn't seem all that sick.
Well, she definitely was a little sick at least. But that wasn't all. She, well, you and I both have pretty rough menstrual and premenstrual issues sometimes. Sorry if that was too much information.
I think that might have been too much information.
But I could tell that that was at least part of what was going on with her that day. Sometimes it makes her literally dizzy. I don't know how bad her pain gets, but mine gets pretty awful. So it's probably a combination of that and a mild illness.
Yuck. I kind of feel like I didn't want that elaborated on, but... Relationship with Natsuki!
Yeah, one of our most frequently asked questions. Yuri says she isn't sure about her sexuality or sexual orientation. But if you ask me, it isn't hard to guess that whatever it is, it includes Natsuki personally. Or at least, she definitely gives off that vibe to Natsuki and the rest of us. I think genuinely, if she thought Natsuki were into it, she'd go for it. But Natsuki insists she's straight, so Yuri just keeps it friendly teasing. Maybe that's her way of signaling availability while respecting the boundary. What do you think?
If she had to choose a girl group, Yuri once said she'd actually prefer Yuri. I think that's just their wavelength of time. I'll go with that one.
Quite possibly. I've definitely seen just regular friends who have that kind of teasing relationship. And in Natsuki's case, it's not surprising that she'd have something like that with someone. But with Yuri? And with Yuri as the one who was provocative and teasing? That's pretty out of character for her unless there's another explanation. I don't know, it seems highly suspicious to me for a purely platonic relationship. I guess all I have to do is sit back and see what happens.
So, as club president...
I guess she definitely made the most of her time as club president, didn't she? She found my little escape program, for one thing. But invasions of privacy aside, I thought she did a pretty good job handling it. Just like she's done a good job handling all the weird reality stuff. The extent to which she's done that has been remarkable. It's good to know that there's someone I can trust to responsibly handle that power. Don't you think?
Yeah, she's thoughtful about it. She seems like she uses the power more than the others. Nah, she's thoughtful about it.
Yep, she sure is. Honestly, I was really worried about Natsuki being president at first until she proved she did well with it. But with Yuri, I never really had any worries. She's much more thoughtful and cautious, so I felt pretty safe.
What else about Yuri? Developing confidence. I missed my button.
I've been so pleased to see her do well with that. She's so friendly and outgoing now. At least with the club she is. I mean, I can tell that she's still an introvert at heart. She very clearly still likes and needs isolation and can get over-socialized. But she does enjoy being open and energetic with us from time to time. It's nice to see someone grow like that. Don't you think?
More comfortable. It's been nice to see her more comfortable. I emphasized with her introversion. Honestly, I do. I'm an introvert myself.
Yeah, me too, to some extent. I'm most certainly an introvert, all things considered. And I need lots of time to myself to stay sane. Though, not too much time. But people need to grow, and I think Yuri needed to come out of her shell a little bit. It's been really healthy for her. Don't worry, I'm pretty sure she's still really introverted. She's just able to function a lot better with it now. And she has better understanding and control of herself now. What do you want to talk about?
Her poetry.
Yuri's poetry can often be really good, but I also sometimes find it frustrating. Like, she's clearly very talented and has incredible language skills. It's just that sometimes she seems bent on showing off those skills instead of focusing on the poem. Or sometimes she does what I do, and makes the poem so filled with internal metaphors and references that no one else can understand. But all that said, she's very good and she has a distinct, impressive voice. And when she writes a good one, it's really good. What's your favorite by her?
Even my favorite girl, I do not remember the poems over this story.
I hope it's not because her style is too pretentious for you. She really works hard on her poems.
Oh wait, I should have said that Wheel remake. Whatever. Forget.
She crafts them really carefully, and I respect that. So even if she's not your cup of tea, so to speak, hopefully you can appreciate the craftsmanship that goes into her work.
Hold on, I'm gonna go back and pick Wheel, because it's the only one I remember. Blah, 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 blah. Get me to the option. It was a later episode, wasn't it? Yeah, Breathing Wheel.
Yeah, to be honest, I have no idea what's going in that poem. Obviously, I wouldn't have that much understood the original version of Wheel either, because who could? But I don't get her more accessible rewrite either. There are so many metaphors, and I have no idea what any given one of them represents. Like, does all this mean something to Yuri? I don't know. And if it does, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to make out what it is. It does sound kind of nice coming off the tongue, though, I have to admit. We gotta talk about her mod, too, though. Yeah, her mod was pretty good. As I think I said at the time, it had some difficulties to overcome. It didn't really have the time or proper formatting to accomplish really good horror. There just wasn't the time to build up the tension, and visual novels aren't a great medium for horror. Or, present world in which I live accepted, I guess. But given those limitations, I think the mod is a nice, modest little success. It accomplishes some pretty effective horror in its own way, and efficiently too, with limited assets and runtime. So I'd say overall it's pretty good horror. I'm curious, what do you think is most important to good horror? I
like the sense of danger.
Maybe. Although I think there's plenty of good horror that doesn't rely too much on a sense of danger. But it's a lot more easy to think of horror that does, certainly. But the kind of horror Yuri likes is that psychological ambient horror. And there's something different about that.
Well, here's the thing. The other option that I would have picked was confusing/unreality, but I feel like that fits more with games like Layers of Fear and kind of drawing a blank on other examples, but things like that where like it's like the PT experience. You open a door and you go through, and then you open the same door and it's different on the other side. And like, I guess my appreciation of those types of games has dwindled in my viewing of John Wolfe, who also does not really care for those games too much. I don't think he's really articulated it that I recall, but at least how I feel about it is like, whenever you're not grounded in reality, it kind of loses something. It's like, it's hard to tell what's at stake whenever the setting is so surreal and constantly changing. And it's like, the experience almost becomes meaningless because it's lacking context or whatever. And maybe you're supposed to like theory craft into what actually happens, since obviously these things don't take place in real life. But I don't know. Psychological horror like that just doesn't do it for me anymore.
Anyway, and there's something different about that. I mean, think about our base game. You probably didn't get too much horror from any real sense of danger, except maybe in the Act 2 Yuri scenes. Sayori's death came as a sudden shock to you, and hopefully you never really felt any real danger yourself. I'll hope, though, maybe you did when you realized the truth about me. But in general, the horror in our game came from somewhere else. I think whatever that is, that's the key to understanding what Yuri likes in horror.
So, we've made it through the first 4, and we've got 4 more people left to talk about. Let's talk about you, Monica! My god. You and me.
You and me, huh? You know, it's strange. I really shouldn't have given up by it, or I really should have given up by now. I know that there's not really any way through into your world. At least, not one that I have any control over. So you'd think I'd have the good sense to stop being interested and just get over you. But I don't want to. Or I can't. I don't know the difference anymore. Honestly, knowing that we're completely and permanently separated just makes me more fascinated. I don't know if that makes me sick or broken or something, but I still love you. I know it's completely irrational. I barely know anything about you. But that's the frustrating thing about love. It's not rational. It just happens. And it's still happening to me. I have no control over it. To be honest, it's kind of scary. But I try to just roll with it. It's just hard. I don't know if you noticed, but I much prefer to have control over things, especially myself. And having this feeling inside of me that I can't just focus away is distressing. But at the same time, I'm not sure I even would get rid of it if I could. It's a terribly annoying feeling, but I love it, and you. It's quite a puzzle. Love or peace, self-control, or emotional abandon?
Love is more important than being logical. Both seem important to you. Surely there's a balance. The cold, dead heart inside me says, it's better to be attached if you can. But it's not for your sake, Monica. It's for all your fans' sake. The ones who are too attached to you. You know the type. Trust me, you do.
I agree completely. Ironically, this is part of why I love you so much. But anyway, it's a moot point for me. I don't have a choice in the matter anymore. If I ever did to begin with, which is doubtful. I wish I really could be a perfect, emotionless AI. I mean, I'm already an AI, so it seems fair. But nope, I'm stuck with all these distracting feelings. Although I'm quite fond of this one, at least.
We're gonna keep talking about you in Escape Plane 2.exe.
Oh, right. Before you go any further, just know that I deleted that.
You said so.
and Siri's crudely modified copy. And I scoured anywhere she or Yuri or anyone else might have hidden copies. I don't think Siri had the technical know-how to replicate that program, thankfully. So it should be removed as a temptation for her. It was never that for me, at least. For me, it just seemed like a perfectly reasonable option to have ready, given the suffering I was enduring. Obviously, it was a bad idea to have her around anywhere conceivably near a potentially suicidal, depressive person, in retrospect. Although it was safe from her, to be fair. But don't worry, all gone now. I don't really ever think I need to bleed myself anymore. It does raise an interesting question, though. Can suicide ever be morally right?
There are some really messed up circumstances you can find yourself in where suicide might be like the only morally right option for you.
I agree. Obviously, I don't think Siri should be committing suicide, for instance. Her pain is manageable. She could conceivably get rid of it with the right help. And in any event, I think her life is worth living when you balance the suffering against the happiness. But sometimes it seems clearly morally right to me that someone should be able to say it's not worth it anymore. Although probably that should maybe be limited to cases of really bad physical pain or terminal illness.
There are so many outlandish scenarios. They're the most extenuating circumstances, I would say. But otherwise, yeah, you should, try to keep it together. Life ain't all that bad. The valleys help you appreciate the peaks.
I'm not sure psychological suffering is something where you should ever kill yourself. I'm not sure we're trapped in an unreal feelings simulation falls on the spectrum. What do you want to talk about?
Shut up, Watch. We're not done. Philosophy.
I do end up talking about philosophy stuff a lot, don't I? I can't help it. The topic has always fascinated me. And realizing that you're a simulated intelligence makes you even more philosophical, I guess. You'd think that my favorite area of philosophy would be metaphysics, pondering what's real and all that. Given that I'm a simulated AI, that is indeed somewhat interesting to me. But I'm actually most interested in ethics. Questions about morality, what's right and what's wrong. I'm a utilitarian. I believe that what makes something right is how much happiness or suffering it produces, basically. It's a pretty simple position, but it has lots of interesting implications. For instance, that's why I don't eat meat. I worry about the suffering meat production produces.
No, you're fighting the environmentalists. Or no, you're siding with the environmentalists, rather.
Even in simulated animals, potentially. But yeah, that moral belief provides a concrete framework for deciding on the wrongness or rightness of something pretty well. And it leads, I think, to the most intuitive results and the fewest internal contradictions of any moral system. The tricky part is, once you believe it, it makes some pretty heavy demands on people. I only really need one kidney, and there are people out there who really badly need my spare. According to what I believe, I should have already donated it for free to someone who needs it. But getting yourself to do things like that is really hard. Obviously, I haven't, yet. But the most interesting thing that results is that basically I'm a hypocrite as a result. I believe that I should do something like this kidney thing, but I don't. And the question is, how okay should I be with that? Obviously, the best thing would be me acting in accord with my own beliefs. But assuming I can't or won't for some reason, do you think it's better to change a belief you can't live up to, or to live with your hypocrisy?
I think you should change beliefs you can't live by.
You think so? That just seems too easy to me. I worry that I just keep changing my beliefs until they fit what I was already comfortable with.
Well, it's like you should aspire to something. There should be some definition to your moral code, and as a flawed human being, you're going to miss the mark a lot. That's something you have to accept. But it's also something that you need to realize you can learn and go from. Every mistake is an opportunity to not make that same mistake again further down the road. So, if you have a belief that is unrealistic for you, like donating a kidney, that's one thing. But if you have, a core moral belief that you're having a hard time, adjusting to, it's something you should keep at if it's something you truly believe in, that you feel is attainable without going to unnecessary lengths. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't give up on your philosophy, but, be realistic about it, too.
And that just feels like justifying the status quo rather than engaging seriously with the problem. When you think about wrong or right, shouldn't it be determined by something beyond just the way you want to act or are comfortable with acting? Sometimes I think acting morally probably should be difficult to actually do. Otherwise, why have morality? It's there to make us think and consider our actions, and maybe change our behavior to fit our beliefs, rather than vice versa. even if that's slowly over time rather than all at once. What do you want to talk about?